Hi guys, it's me Udhav Saraswat. Welcome to my YouTube channel Udhav Tech. From today I am starting a course on Spring Boot. So what all we are going to cover in this course? We will be covering basics of Spring Boot. We will be creating a basic REST web application which will be hosting REST endpoints and having database connections. And then step by step we will be learning advanced features of Spring Boot, and then in the end we will be creating a multi-threaded real-time production level web application using Spring Boot. So stay tuned for that and let's get started with the first session of this course. So before starting with Spring Boot, we need to understand what Spring Framework is, what are the shortcomings of Spring Framework, and how does that Spring Boot overcome those shortcomings. We have to understand that logic. So Spring Framework provides us a platform to write our Java code, integrate with database, and perform some business functionality. There are other platforms also available apart from Spring Framework, that are Spark and Rails. Coming to Spring Boot is a framework which is built over top of Spring Framework with three core capabilities. First capability is auto configuration. By auto configuration, we mean such as, for example, we are having Tomcat server. It will be having some values to be configured. So those values are auto configured in Spring Boot. While in Spring Framework application, we will have to configure those values in an XML files. Second point is an opinionated approach to configuration. So the default configurations which are picked in Spring Boot are tried and tested values across different industries, and then those values are picked up. Standalone application using Spring Boot, we can create a jar file, and that jar file we can run in our servers directly. We might have heard this term many times by many people, migration project. So what migration projects are? So there are some conventional technologies such as Oracle ATG, which are old conventional technologies which are very rigid to modifications and are not that scalable to what today Spring Boot and microservices offer. So those projects are getting migrated from that conventional system to the new system, including Spring Boot application microservices. And also there are now AI and ML getting developed for Java as well. So one such library is Deep Java library, which is developed by AWS. This diagram depicts the same, which we just now discussed. Spring Framework plus embedded HTTP servers such as Tomcat with auto-configured default values minus the XML configuration. So what these XML configurations are, I'm having a file. I will show you that for example. So this is a XML configuration file for Spring Framework. It is having bean tag. So this is a way to define a bean tag in Spring Framework application configuration file. With the class, we are saying that create a bean for this particular class, and we are defining extra properties for that as well. So this way we have to do for all the beans we require, all the database connections we require. So you can think of like how many files or how big it will be to handle at one point of time. There will be so many files, like 20, 30 files, configuration files in the application itself, if application is little bit large. So that will become a problem to handle. So that thing is completely gone in case of Spring Boot. So that is a one drawback of Spring Framework and one advantage of Spring Boot. Coming to the Spring Boot flow architecture, so this is a Spring Boot application, web application, and this client is basically a web browser which will be making an HTTP request to our web application, and this controller will be hosting REST endpoints, and then controller will be send that request to service layer, which will be having business functionality coded in Java programming language, and that will be connecting to the database and modifying and updating the data. Don't worry, we will be covering this diagram in detail later on in the sessions. Coming to Spring Boot features, Spring Boot provides us features such as auto configuration. This is the first one. So we have already discussed like auto configured values for Tomcat provides. The second feature is admin features and security. From security perspective, we can create admin and users different roles, and based on different roles, we can provide different access for them to the application. For logging, we are having different options such as logging to a console or logging to a file. So that is possible. By default, logging library is not does not comes with Spring Boot application, and we have to add that. And there are two libraries which are mostly used. First one is logback, and second is the log4j. Caching, Spring Boot provides us caching for database as well as application level, and there are three application level cachings available: first level, second level, and third level. We will be covering that later on in the session. Kotlin support. Kotlin and Java are two programming language which runs on JVM. So Spring Boot provides us a feature to convert Java-based application to Kotlin and Kotlin to Java, vice versa. JSON support. So JSON is a Java simple object notation format, which is a data format which is particularly came after the existence of JavaScript. So JSON has now become a very common format for API request and response payload in the REST world. So we will be creating a REST endpoint, and we will be using JSON as a data structure. Testing, for testing we will be having test classes, and using JUnit and Mockito we can do testing for our business functionality. So these are the features which Spring Boot provides. What other than Spring Boot are there in the Spring domain? So there are many things, but we can categorize them into majorly three things. First is the Spring Batch. Spring Batch is nothing but a Spring application specialized for batch applications. So for example, consider we have a use case where we have to take a large amount of data from a database and do some processing on that. So that particular case will fall under Spring Batch application. Spring Cloud is having so many small modules in itself, and it enhances the way that we use Spring Boot. Spring AOP stands for aspect oriented programming. It allows us to have asynchronous programming in our Spring Boot application. Coming to the advantages of Spring Boot, mostly we have discussed these things. So first one is easy development. So we saw that it comes with auto configuration. We can right away start with development. We are having jar files for easy deployment, standalone applications, Tomcat server already configured, no XML configurations required, less source code, easy to start and manage. So all these things we have already covered. That's all for the first session. If you are having any queries, doubts, or suggestions for me, please put them down in the comment box. Till then, see you in the next session.